Hello and welcome to the TDS Talking Early Years podcast, where each week we'll be joined by educational experts from across the globe who will offer exclusive insights, inspiration and guidance to really help practitioners unlock the potential for learning in the early years. Hello and welcome back to the TDS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Alistair Bryce-Clegg, and my guest, Kate Moxley. Now, over the past 3 episodes, Kate and I have been discussing loads of really interesting, fascinating things around wellbeing and mental health, and not just around the wellbeing and mental health of children, but also how important our wellbeing and mental health is in affecting children's development. So in this 4th and final episode, we're going to try and give you some practical tips of how you can really put wellbeing at the center of your setting. And I think maybe a good place to start, Kate, is that idea of reflective practice and how, as if you can get a culture of reflective practice within your setting, then you're well on the way to making sure that well-being stays at the centre.
Absolutely. It's so important to what we do professionally, the roles, everything we're describing, but also personally. I think sometimes though lots of barriers or obstacles get in our way of being reflective or being able to be vulnerable in those reflections, especially if we are working in an environment or with people perhaps who haven't got vulnerability to model to us, if we haven't had the opportunity to have appropriate professional development training around like leadership and performance management. And the reason I say that is if and again, I think back over my career, if I had a manager who was able to share things that I was doing really well, and then also encourage me to think about things I could improve upon as areas of development, then that would be so much more healthy than, not being able to talk about anything I was good at without feeling like I was going to, be really embarrassed or, because again, I think, in this country, culturally, we're kind of taught to not be too big for our boots.
We are, and I think it's about owning the things you're good at and in a setting saying, and Kate's really good at that, and Alistair's really good at that. So Alistair, go and watch Kate, and Kate, go and watch Alistair. Yeah. And I can remember times, especially in my early teaching career, looking back on it now, we'd probably call it coaching, which we didn't then, but times when you were coached and times when you were told. And when you were told, it was great if you were being told the good stuff, but it wasn't so great if you've been told the bad stuff. Whereas really good coaching is where you're being developed and you don't even, it's like good teaching, know. And it's that idea as well that we need to get out of this headspace that we've constantly got to be trying to impress somebody. Yes, you want to do the best job that you can do, absolutely. But like with kids, you want to do it because it's the best job that you can do and you want to be recognized for that without the kind of craving the praise. So a good leader, again, a good manager is not somebody that makes you crave their praise because they never praise you unless it's really, really good. It's somebody where you're going to get honest, objective feedback. And also, ideally, a setting where if something's not right or you feel it's not right, you can go and say, look, you're asking me to do this, or this has come up, this doesn't work for me, or this doesn't feel right for me, and nobody's going to bite your head off and say, well, we've done it like that since 1983 and that's how we do it here. Or the classic that I get a lot is people will say, but my manager or my head teacher will say, but when Ofsted come. So then it becomes about, well, we're doing this for Ofsted, rather than saying, well, when Ofsted come and say, why do you do that? We're going to blow you away with our argument around we do that because child development, team, mental health, well-being.
Yeah, we do it for ourselves. We do it for our children. We do it because it's what works in our community. And a lot of what we're describing is that community of care. That's something I talk a lot about in my book, that collectivism, that sense of, we can't all thrive here. We can't all be happy, healthy and comfortable here if we aren't all taking care of each other. And sometimes we shout self-care around as though it's super easy to do. But actually, if you are the person, as we've kind of talked about in earlier sessions, going home and trying to, have a bath or, do some self-care as though it's really easy, and you haven't actually got the time, the energy left or the money to do any of these methods, what we really mean is we need access to community care, collective caring.
Yeah.
And so have I got earlier in an episode, we talked about, why am I in this workspace? Why have I chosen to bring my skills and talents to this setting, to this environment? Or why have I opened up my own child-minding business? Or, why am I working with children? What are my values and beliefs? What do I believe in? And what do I hold dear? And so is that then a reciprocal relationship? And as a leader and a manager, the biggest influence we can have on other people is how we are taking care of ourselves, how we talk about ourselves, how we treat ourselves, linking back to what we were saying about, not being taught not to shine too bright or appearing too confident, actually feeling, secure in myself. The very things we're trying to achieve and obtain for children's emotional well-being are some of the things that we feel uncomfortable about. Oh, you look really nice today, and we're like, oh, I just washed my hair, or I really like this display that you did, and you're like, oh, don't even look at it, I'm so embarrassed, I haven't finished it off. It's like, oh, actually, can we just say thank you? Can we challenge each other to just own it and try to celebrate what we are bringing? So if we link it back to our discussions around identity and, spending that time to get to know who we are as people, then what we are also able to do is show up at work as our whole self, and our workplace benefits from that. We're not trying to hide stuff. We're not trying to fit in. We feel as though we can show up and be, authentic in ourselves. But that also then translates into my values and my beliefs and my words, my my behavior, my actions, they're all aligned. So I can't be on this podcast and say I'm a mental health advocate and I want to increase mental health literacy if, the minute we stop recording, I'm rude or I'm difficult, or like we were talking about earlier, I don't look after my own well-being. I don't have boundaries in place. I email people at all hours of the day and night and weekend. I drink, wine every day and eat order Deliveroo. Like, I have to honor and model what I'm saying is important to me, because otherwise I can't say I'm a mental health advocate. And so how are we thinking about this and reflecting on this in our settings to support one another? Because actually, when we think about how to do the job and how to do it in mentally healthy ways and cultivate these healthy communities, we've got to recognize that we need to be able to promote well-being and celebrate it, rather than just waiting until people are ill, rather than just reacting to Caroline who's off sick again, like we were saying earlier, someone else who's exhausted, or hold on, how am I protecting the energy here of my team, and thinking about that at certain key points throughout the year, like we started off talking about in the autumn term, thinking about through the winter, how does that change for me based on, my family commitments, my religion, my, things that are important to me. And so how am I able to address those factors in the workplace that might risk or compromise my well-being? Because again,
without having to, so if you're going through a divorce or whatever it may be, it's not that we're saying you have to come and announce to everybody all the details of what's going on, but it's just because there are things that people will talk about and things that they won't talk about, but it's about having a conversation where you can say, right, I've got something going on at the moment, not necessarily having to divulge all the detail, but, and I think really interesting your point about the emails before, because bad habits creep in over time, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, well, if my manager, head teacher, whatever, is emailing me on a Saturday, that must mean they're working on a Saturday. Does that mean they expect me to work on a Saturday? And if I don't respond to this email, will they then think that I'm not committed to this job? And it's even just little things like that get a little dialogue in somebody's head or it just leaks into the fibre of, going to be chucked out by the caretaker at the end of the day. So there is a fine balance, and it's about creating a culture, and that takes time. But again, fundamentally putting in place things like, you said, you're owning the things that you're good at acknowledging the things that you want to develop, but really own those things and really celebrate them and say, yeah, I'm bloody good at that because that's a talent. It's, I've worked hard on that. Okay, I'm not so good at that. And rather than feeling shame or embarrassment, you think, right, well, how am I going to get better at that and who's going to help me? And having a structure around you that has things in place that would enable that to happen rather than you trying to struggle on and do it by yourself, or having a structure where you regularly review as a team, have any bad habits begun to creep in, like, oh, I've got to turn this around, I'm just going to skip lunch today, I'm not going to go. Or, I mean, often in schools and nurseries, it's the same where people say, I mean, I've not been into the staff room for a week because I just haven't had time to eat my lunch. And you're like, that doesn't, I get that there might be circumstances, lack of staff, that mean actually physically for the well-being of children, you can't do that. But on a regular basis, you should be taking time in the day. When I first started teaching my very first school, I used to go into the staff room and there used to be a copy of People's Friend delivered on a regular basis. However often that came out. But it was an all-female staff other than me, and they would knit, and somebody would be doing cross stitch, and they would sit and chat, and they would take their full lunch break. By the time I became a head teacher, which wasn't that long after, you were lucky if you got to the staff room, people were eating kind of Rivita and cottage cheese while running down the corridor. And again, all of that doesn't make you you're getting stressed to the children that you're getting, you're underfed, your battery isn't charged. So actually, a leaf through People's Friend and a couple of rows of crochet, if that's what your thing is, it centers you, it settles you, it clears your mind, you go back into that classroom more rested. And so therefore it became, you looked at that as, oh my God, I'm in the classroom doing worksheets or prepping this or prepping that. She sat crocheting in the staff room, but actually, looking back on it now, they had the better idea and probably were the better teachers for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the way we, I suppose, think about how things have changed, but in terms of lunch breaks and taking that time for ourselves, like, this is the thing, is that, so many educators who are, training or qualifying, they are using that training as a springboard for something else, or they are not sticking around, and who can blame them? My daughter turned 18 earlier this month, and I always say, when we're thinking about what we want for our children, the biggest thing I want for her is to be healthy. And someone asked me, would I like her to be a teacher? And I said, hell no. And it made me feel actually really sad, because, and that is the reality, is that our children, our society, our country is missing out on very skilled, wonderful teachers, because the job role is hard. And what is happening is we are being exhausted by our own resilience. And there is this myth that resilience is about always being strong and never faltering. But resilience is, again, in the way that we model this with our children, it is about being able to bend and not break. And too many of our settings and our schools are not encouraging teachers to rest and pause and create spaces of safety. We don't have enough leaders who have enough mental health awareness or knowledge to make sure they're giving their time and energy to their team, to have lunch with each other in the staff room, to model healthy practice. All of these things prevent mental health issues from developing or from worsening. But again, promoting well-being and mental health, from a celebratory approach, what is positive mental health for me? What does it feel like? What does it look like? What do I need to do this job and do it well? And if I want my career, to continue, and I want to carry on and develop my skills and my knowledge, etc., then I've got to protect my own compassion resilience. I've got to protect my own energy. I need to, be in a position to enjoy my job role, but also I'm more than just this job. I'm a person. I've got my own hobbies, if I can remember what they are. I've got my own family or interests that exist outside of work. And so how do leaders, managers, how do we celebrate going home on time, finishing on time, and knowing that all of these restorative, methods, all of this practice means that hopefully people are more likely to stay in this job role because they feel healthy and safe, they feel supported, they know they've got managers that want to minimise or reduce the pressure and the workload, and they know that people will do the right thing. But instead, we've got cultures still like we're describing, where I'm trying to impress my head teacher and I'm trying to let people know that they did pick the right person for the job. And in order to do that, I've got to go above and beyond. I've got to bend over backwards, and I've got to become well.
Everybody else seems to be doing it, and everybody on my flaming Instagram account is working from dawn till dusk, and all of their settings look amazing, like there's something off Pinterest, and it's all of that extra added pressure that even though nobody's saying that to you, you think, well, I'm not doing that. Well, should I be doing that? I think, and lots of people listening to this will say, but the system doesn't allow for that. Ofsted, whatever it may be, the expectations of our system mean that we all have to work to this level just to get it done. And in one respect, then the answer to that is, well, we are a massive workforce, and if we are all experiencing that, and I think from the hundreds of schools that I now have the privilege of going into, we are, then why aren't we doing something about that? Because literally this is not sustainable. But also within your own setting, school, whatever it may be, it's about you as a leader actively doing something that says, right, in the construct of what I've got to work in, I am still going to push against that, and we're still going to have conversations about how we value. Because when you are dead, nobody's going to write on your gravestone, thank God she came in late to back the boards, or whatever it may be. So, you have a life after usually your career. And then that's the bit where you look back and think, I wish I'd spent more time climbing mountains. I wish I'd spent more time with my children. Because once you've left your space and moved on, time moves on. And yes, your memory may linger there, but actually for you as a human being, having this one life once, it's all feeling very deep now, but you need to value you. And that's what brings your best person to work.
Oh yeah. And it makes me think of, and I talk about it in my book. We spoke about collectivism earlier. Like, what is my legacy? That's what we're saying here. What are people going to say about me or remember about me? And is it just from a workplace context? But what about my own family? Will my daughter remember having to walk to school with the childminder in the rain for 7 years? Will she remember all of the other things that I did along the way? And I was so inspired by the Seeker Nation, an Indigenous tribe in Canada, and their theory is called the breath of life theory, and it is about when they're gone, their teachings live on, and everything we're talking about from the start of our different episodes is all around our identity and who we are, the people that came before us, and what legacy, what we are leaving behind. And in the Seeker Nation, they value community actualization over individual actualization. And it is this understanding that it's not just about the self, it is about how we as a group of people, how we empower one another, and support one another to value well-being as as a foundation. So my final thought is around how can we advocate a philosophy of well-being that protects the emotional well-being of educators, so we can use our energy productively, and we can encourage and empower each other to have professional boundaries, so that we have then got the skills we need to compassionately care, instead of the other way around, where we're just drained of all our caring and compassion, and we're just depleted. We as you said, there's hundreds of thousands of us that make up this sector. Yeah. And if we come together as a collective, it doesn't have to be shouting big, loud voices going on marches, but it can be in putting boundaries in place. It can be saying no. It can be understanding how to influence change with regard to our sector on a political level, whether that's nationally or locally? How do we link up in partnership with parents so they understand and appreciate the role that we do, and how important and necessary it is to respect and honour our well-being as well? And I think if we can come together, there's so much potential to make our voice heard as an undervalued sector. And that's got to be really important, because it is those big outside factors that are directly influencing what's happening inside. And, it's not a silent emergency. It's really loud. We know people are struggling and suffering, and our children are too, and we all deserve better. And so, we've got to want that for each other.
Absolutely. And I think that is just the perfect way to end this episode. I think, we've talked about lots of the past 4 episodes. Kate's given us some brilliant ideas around just how we can reassess who we are as practitioners, and also look at our settings in a little more depth to try and put well-being at the heart of everything we do. And obviously there's lots more advice and inspiration in Kate's book. So if you haven't got that, have a look at that. But I think if people leave with nothing else other than, it's really important for us as individuals to put our well-being first, because if we can get that bit right, or at least feel like we're on the right path, then everything else will stem from that. Kate Moxley, thank you so much for taking part in this podcast. I've really enjoyed catching up with you, but also, as always, been really inspired by what you've got to say. So thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you, and you.
I'd like to say a huge thank you to our guest Kate for joining us and providing such valuable insights. You've been listening to the TDS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Alistair Bryce-Clegg, and Kate Moxley. Now, if you've been inspired by our conversation today, then don't forget, you can sign up via the link in our episode notes to be the first to hear about future episodes, and also access exclusive follow-up content, which includes ideas for your setting and the links to all the relevant resources.